Good morning. Today we're going to learn about life in the city-states in ancient Sumer. So last lesson we briefly learned about the Sumer civilization, which was in what we now call Iraq. Today we're going to learn more about their daily life. What were city-states? The land between the Tigris and Euphrates River often flooded and left rich, fertile land for planting. The Sumerian people took advantage of this and established their cities on these areas. Large, dry, desert-type areas between the fertile ground separated cities from one another and made communication and transportation between the cities very difficult. This led to the development of city-states, with each city being the center of its own self-governed unit of civilization. City-states frequently warred with each other to gain glory, reputation, more land. So large walls were built all around the outskirts of the city-states, and guards were employed to protect the people inside from attack. Now, the Sumerian social hierarchy. People in ancient Sumer were roughly divided into two classes, the free and the enslaved. The free classes consisted of rulers, kings, and priests, and also skilled workers, such as farmers, merchants, and writers. The enslaved people were forced to work serving the higher classes. Slaves were often criminals, but sometimes people became slaves in order to pay off debts. Which one would you prefer to have been? Personally, I would have chosen to be a free class. Ziggurats. Each city-state was centered around a temple built to honor the gods. By 2100 BC, these temples had become huge monuments, known as ziggurats. Ziggurats had three platforms, steep steps up the front, and the temple at the top. What was it like to live in a city-state? Rich Sumerians lived in huge palaces, while the poor lived in cramped mud brick houses which were tightly packed in along the narrow streets. Houses in the cities were built very close together, and most had no windows. They usually had an enclosed downstairs area and an upstairs room without a roof, which provided a cooler place to sleep and prepare food. Richer people had more rooms in their houses, sometimes including servant quarters or a chapel. Now, some of these houses were also built in a U shape, which created a garden area in the middle. Fishermen and farmers who lived outside the cities often built houses out of reeds, which were tightly bound together and then covered in clay. Now, can you write down the 5 most interesting facts you've learned so far about the city-states? Also, can you write down the 5 most interesting facts you've learned about what it's like to live in a city-state? What were the houses made of? As stone was scarce, buildings were mostly made out of sun-baked mud bricks. Over time, the Sumerians developed wooden molds to ensure these bricks were of a uniform shape and size. Eventually, they developed the process of firing the bricks in a kiln to make them harder and stronger. They used a substance called bitumen, a semi-solid black petrol-based material, to waterproof the bricks and to fill in any gaps in the buildings. Now, the building process. If you were to build a Sumerian mud brick house, you would have to follow these instructions. Step number 1, gather up mounds of clay from the earth. Step number 2, form the clay into bricks using a brick mold so they are the same shape and size. Step number 3, place your bricks inside the kiln to dry them out and make them hard and strong. Step number 4, coat the bricks in bitumen to waterproof them. Step number 5, layer the bricks on top of each other to create 4 high flat walls forming a square shape. Step number 6, only add tiny upstairs windows as you want to keep the house downstairs cool. Step number 7, add a second floor, leaving the top open to provide an open air terrace. Step number 8, fill in any gaps in the bricks with more bitumen. Step number 9, paint your exterior walls white. And finally, move in and furnish your apartment. So now we know how to build a Sumerian mud brick house. Right? So that's it for today. Our lesson is done. I'll see you next lesson.